Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of Practical Pet Chat. As always, we appreciate you joining us, and we hope you'll share us with one of your pet-loving friends this week. Lorin, I continue to see headlines that jump out about fresh food, fresh food, fresh food. You and I obviously love fresh food, but it is interesting where we're getting those headlines from. So I wanted to ask you, as you're seeing these headlines, what's jumping out to you?
Yeah, you have to be careful of those things, like everything that jumps out at you. There's a difference between whole food, whole fresh food jumping out at you and fresh food jumping out at you. And that said, I don't want to pee on the in the Cheerios of anybody who's doing some version of that, because it's a step in the right direction. But, if you look at there's companies out there that are using fresh whole ingredients minimally processed, um, if any processing, although if it's commercial, it's going to be considered processed to some degree. But then you see the big guys, the big guys who, if you can't beat them, join them, have come along and decided, well, crap, we need to get into this market because we're missing out. There was a there's an interesting fact that in 2021, the company Packaged Facts reported that extruded dry kibble prevalence in US households was 94%. And currently, petfoodindustry.com reports a prevalence rate declined to 61%. So that's about a third of the market that has gone away from
Yeah,
kibble.
that's tremendous.
It's huge, huge. I can remember conversations 15, 20 years ago of like kibble's here to stay. And to some degree it is here to stay, but we never would have thought that we would see that kind of an impact. And that's what happened since 2021 to 2025. That's a short time frame
Yeah.
in the big scheme of things. So I really celebrate that. I love it. It's a cautionary love, because I think people still need to look at ingredients, still need to see how things are made, still need to look at the company, still need to look at sourcing, all of that kind of stuff, the quality of the ingredients, everything, because a company that takes its kibble and soaks it and calls that fresh food, that doesn't really fit the fresh food category. So, you really need to, like everything, right? Like everything, there are degrees of good, bad, better, worse, all of that. So you really have to still do your homework. It's not a one size fits all. Not all of them are created the same, and it matters. It's not necessarily cost uh associated either. Because you would think, well, if it's better made, if it's human grade, if it's got, the best ingredients, it's going to be the most expensive. And like usual, that's not the case either. So you just really have to still do your due diligence. But if you can add a good, high quality, fresh food, if you can't feed it by itself and you can add it to the bowl, you are really taking a huge leap in the right direction of improving not only the health of your animal, but it's the animal's longevity.
Right, right. I want to stand up and scream, congratulations, pet parents, because
Oh,
I agree with you.
exactly.
This is not only a monumental shift, but in such a short period of time. And I know you and I go to a number of different conferences over the years, and we'd get the snarky comments from a lot of those big manufacturers who are now jumping on the fresh food train
Right?
of like, well, that's fine. You can have your 1% or 2%. We're still 90+% of the market. And to see that shift, it certainly is not being driven by those manufacturers. It's being
Mm-mm.
driven by you all, the pet parents. And I love that. I think that is phenomenal. And, a testament to folks do want to do better. And because they want to do better, we are seeing this change and this evolution. And I agree with you. I don't want to discount any movement towards a fresher food and a better, financial, nutritional balance. But the financial side of it too is something to look at. So I'm going to hit on that in a second. I love how you called that out. But I do think overall to see that shift and, as the market always does, when it sees a trend, it jumps. This is more than a trend. This is now
a shift
here. Yeah, this is here. This is going to be part of it for the long run. And it's one of the things that I did love seeing. There are many things I don't like about the social media world and everything we see on the internet. This is one of those that I did like to see of just a greater awareness, greater access to all of this. I remember when I was doing recipes long ago and, hey, look, I'm just making this and I'm adding it in. And folks would be, just like, you're crazy that you make things for your dogs and blah, blah. And now it's wild how many people do that on a regular basis. I still get emails, even though we did those probably a decade plus ago, from people weekly, like, oh, I tried that recipe. And as we all do, we all learn, right? And we'd want the recipe to be changed and do things. But it is one of those testaments of, like, I think too that people are also more willing to embrace that change when they see better outcomes. And I think at the end of the day, the more fresh that you get into your pet's bowl and into their bellies, the better off they're going to be.
Well, look how long we've been trying. I mean, we've been we've been on this mantra. So many of us in the industry have been on this mantra for years on years on years. And you think, gosh, is anybody listening? Is anybody even paying attention? But I really think with the direct to consumer market, which you mentioned social media, that's oftentimes social media driven. And so all those direct to consumer food manufacturers who are making a version of that. If it keeps popping up in your news feed and it's this company and then it's that company and oh look, here's another company and then there's this, it's like, huh, you start to pay attention because there's 8 companies that you're being hit with in social media, not to mention if you're going to, a really well done independent store that has food, they're going to carry some options. And it's like, oh my gosh, we finally made a dent. We finally got through. People are paying attention and getting it. Remember when it was like, oh, I'd never feed my dog people food. Yeah,
Right.
what do you mean? It's all people food.
Yeah.
It's all, broccoli is broccoli. You don't find broccoli for kids separate from broccoli from adults, separate from broccoli for animals. And, same thing with eggs and things like that. So now that people are going, oh yeah, yeah. And they see the difference. They try it, they see the difference. But I know you're gonna talk about this, but I have little dogs. And I'm in the position to be able to feed my little dogs nothing but fresh food, which is huge. And there's enough options that I can rotate through different proteins and things like that. But you like to have normal sized pets. So talk about how you handle that.
Yeah, and I think that's still where the market needs to evolve into, where it's a better financial option. Because as you just mentioned, with the smaller dogs, it's almost been very easy to transition to that. And that's where, when I see some folks like, it's so easy, you should do that. And I'll be like, well, what breed of dog do you have? And they'll have a 7-pound dog. And I'm like, okay, times that by 10 or
Hmm.
15, would you still make that decision? Because that's literally what I and many other folks are looking at. It's like, oh, I buy one chub and this lasts for, 2 weeks. Well, okay, but if you had one dog, that maybe, that was 100 pounds. Now that lasts for one, maybe a day and a half. And is it economically there yet? So that's where I still struggle with it. I still don't see the commercial offerings being where it's financially better for me to move to a commercial offering versus continuing to pursue it on my own and doing it on my own. And I feel that way not just about foods, I feel that way about treats. So it's not just a main nutrition side of things. There is a lot. I make my own jerky, I make many of my own treats because I'm just able to get so much more out of doing it myself at a much lower cost. And I know what's going into it as opposed to, and I'm not concerned about shelf stable and things like that that can lead to things being, put into stuff that I don't want. So there's still a balance there that we haven't gotten to, but overall, I do think this is a positive shift. And it is funny because you said something that really struck me, and I used to say this when the smaller collective of us, people would get upset because a brand would get bought. And I would say, well, listen, they got bought because they did it right. And the competition, the bigger companies knew that they just couldn't get there. So they thought, let's buy it and let's deconstruct it and see if we can scale it or make it bigger, etc. Inevitably, they made changes. Sometimes we really did not like those. Others we we're like, I wish they hadn't made the change to this or that. This is a complete, they were a lot of sources of pushback to me in that fresh movement and in that, improving the nutritional components and composition of food. And so I think that's even the bigger notification here is I think the long run impact of this is not just that there will be more available. It's that there's going to be more support and more reach for it. And so I see that growing even further because there's going to be less of, and I hesitate to say scare tactics, but we'd see these things and we'd just be like, that is just so cherry picking of one instance out of, random, things that occur as opposed to looking at the majority of instances. And when you got the money, when you got the microphone, you can do those things. And I think that's the other part of this that really jumps out at me is the ability for the media, the traditional companies to own the narrative is gone. And so that is something that I do like seeing in this instance. And I think it's going to hopefully lead to more fresh and better nutritional options for our pets because I think that's so critical for what we're all trying to achieve.
I I want to go back to your situation of having a big dog and not, it financially not being really affordable to feed a commercial option. So you have the skills and the ability and the setup to be able to do otherwise. But for people that don't, I don't want them to dismiss
I agree. Good
feeding,
call. Good catch. Yeah.
anything because they have a bigger dog, anything fresh because they have a bigger dog. If you're not comfortable doing it yourself, we need to get out of the mindset of all or nothing
Yeah.
because it isn't, that's not what it is. It's food.
Right.
It's food. It doesn't have to be, all, I don't know, it doesn't have to be all 100% anything. You can take a bowl of kibble that you're currently feeding and take, 25% of it away and fill that with real food and the ginormous effect that that will have on an animal for its overall health, for, longevity. Oh, it's just, it's not something to be dismissed easily. So I don't want people who aren't skilled, don't have the time, don't know what don't have those kinds of things to go, well, I guess I'll stick with kibble. Just taking
No.
some
Yeah.
away and adding fresh food to it, mixing it in for every, if you can do it every meal, great. If you can't, 3 times a week, whatever you can do is
Yeah.
appropriate and better than what you're currently doing.
Well, I like it. I like that you call it out too. And if I was going to come up with an approach for someone in that situation that didn't have the time, didn't have the desire, there are different reasons. I have a family member who has allergy issues, so raw has not been something I have been able to fully embrace because of the potential, side effects and problems I could create for a family member. So that being said, though, with these commercial solutions, I love what you just pointed out. What a great way also to test it out. Get it, that 25%. Now all of a sudden you're extending, right? Rather than it being the whole meal, now I'm extending that where, hey, okay, now maybe I am getting 5 or 6 meal add-ins and taking that add-in approach. I love that. I think that's great. That's something every meal I've got fresh in there. And the other thing that's going to be interesting for those of you who haven't tried this is I think you'll see what I and many of the folks who have come back to me and shared when they've started to add even just the simplest things. Hey, you got a can of green beans? I'll bet your dog will love the can of green beans. You don't give him the whole can.
Blueberries.
Blueberry, watermelon, all these other things. It's so fun. That I love during the summer this year. I was watching our tortoises eat the watermelon and Bella having watermelon. Okay. And you go, oh my God, my dog would never touch fruit. Trust me, your dog would if you gave them the option. But what's interesting too is you'll see if you're putting it on that kibble that they'll pick the fresh stuff first.
Mhm.
And that is just something that really sparks you because you see the delight. So I do love that. That's a great call out. Maybe if it can't be a all option, I love that because you and I really get frustrated with people going, it's got to be one way or no
Or
way.
the other,
Yeah,
right?
it's just that is not realistic for most people. And we should always do whatever we can. Just a little bit of anything fresh is so much better than, well, forget it. There are
Right.
so many better ways to do that. So
Well, and keep in mind too, since you mentioned raw, again, erasing the lines around the box. If you don't want to do raw, don't do raw.
right.
If you're not comfortable with that, then take something gently cooked. Take something, that isn't cooked to death,
Yeah.
that you have that you can add to the bowl. Please try to add some real meat to the
Yeah.
bowl. Leftover chicken, hamburger, turkey, anything you have that you can
Right.
add. Again, it's a real ingredient. So here we are in a situation where you don't have to drastically change everything you're doing. You don't have to deal with an all or nothing. You're not in a situation where it has to be raw because you're not comfortable with that. It- I, Give me the
Well, and it's
excuses.
not going to be as messy as doing it yourself. So
Right.
the concerns that I have are if it gets unwieldy, if I take over the whole kitchen and I don't hit everything, Clorox wipes and all the rest of that, what have I potentially? This is a much better option to
Hmm.
pivot to and still achieve what I really want to achieve. And now I've got a small contained area that I've got to make sure I've got clean. So I think that's a great call out that you're making here is there are many different ways to get to this enhancement. And this is a good way for you if you want to transition, you want to try it out, you want to elevate and not have to go through not just the work, but the concerns of
Hmm.
clean up, all the rest of it. Where do I store it? It's already, really pretty much pre-taken care of for you in these commercial options. So a lot of benefits
And
here.
there's no more excuses. Whatever the excuses are, I spent 20 years in my store overcoming people's mindset of what they thought was the situation. And I was like, nope, don't need to worry about that. Don't need to do that. You can't do 25% in the bowl. Can you do 10% in the bowl? I mean, whatever the excuses are, give me your excuses and I'll come up with an answer.
Right.
that will overcome that. There's a million ways to add real, fresh ingredients to your for kids bowl and improve everything. Improve their dentition, improve their health, improve their breath, improve their longevity. It's all an improvement. There's no negative to it. Now, I'm not telling you to add burritos, because that's a processed food. We're
Right.
talking about adding real food ingredients. And there's a lot of gently cooked raw, sous vide, however, you make it in a crock pot, whatever. It's real food that you're adding to the bowl. The less cooked, the better.
Yeah.
The more gently cooked, the better, because you retain as many nutrients as possible. But again, you're nothing but improving the daily meal.
Yeah. And I think, where we started with this is the market now has been forced to shift. And
Yes.
I think folks will start to have more options. I think they're going to really feel more comfortable about that decision as well. I have to give marketing some credit. I I was probably, we've all seen those commercials where it's like, you have dog food in your, refrigerator. And, and my kids would tease me all the time, the dogs eat better than we do. Now, that was playful teasing, but I had many friends and family members be like, you're a little obsessed. And I'm like, no, I'm responsible for this bee. So it doesn't matter if it's two-legged kid, four-legged kid, I need to do the best that I can. And by the way, it's not hard to, when I'm, making things for the two-legged kids, to have a portion set aside that I'm not adding the seasonings, I'm not adding all these other things, just keeping it fresh. And it's just a nice steam. Oh my gosh. So I think we are really trending, and that's what I like about this for pet parents, is it's not such a shock of like, oh, you're weird or you're this or you're that. It's a, oh, I think we're flipping the script a bit, where it's like,
We
oh, you
are.
haven't tried that. Well, there's a lot more options for you now.
Mhm.
And as you start to try that, and as you start to, and that's, I think that's one of the things that encouraged me was I had someone say to me the other day, because they've been doing it, and they were like, I've known you a long time. I've watched your videos, and I saw you just using these ingredients. But now, as I'm unpacking and laying it out in the bowl, I'm seeing all those same, the carrots, the peas, the this, the that, the proteins, and it does make sense. And I'm like, don't know why I didn't then. I'm just glad we're there now, and
Right.
that's a positive to me. Um, so yeah, so I think overall this is a positive trend. I'll give you the last word, but yeah, I'm loving this movement for pet parents, and more importantly, our kids, our fur kids. This is a positive step.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean it's encouraging because keep in mind you're not just pet parents in making these choices and reducing the kibble percentage for real fresh food ingredients isn't just affecting manufacturers. You're affecting veterinarians. You're affecting, belief systems that have been completely misaligned for so long. You've got people going, wait a second, fresh food is okay. Real food is okay. Cooked food is okay. I just came back from a vet conference last week, and the numbers of vets that came up and talked about feeding, real whole food. I happen to be there on behalf of a brand, and they can, oh, I recommend this. I recommend this food. I recommend this. I'm like, yes, because the more that happens, the more okay it becomes. And again, it doesn't, they understand. They're telling their clients, you can't feed it exclusively, then add it to whatever you are feeding. Rotate it in. Feed it a couple times a week. Everybody is now understanding and thinking outside the box. So this is something that's affecting every aspect of the market on multiple levels, and it's only going to be a good thing going forward.
Yeah, I am encouraged. I am also encouraged. We're getting more and more emails every week. Folks, share what your thoughts are on this type of movement and this change, this fresh embracing. And it's here to stay. So let us know how you're adjusting, what you're doing. Send us your emails, practicalpetchat@gmail.com. Visit us on all the different social media websites and every place that you can find us. Share us with a friend, especially this episode. Let them know it's okay. Add that fresh food, enhance what you're doing for your pets. Love all this. Thank you for joining us here on Practical Pet Chat.
Thanks, everybody.
The content of this podcast is for informational purposes only. It is not intended as, nor should it be construed as, professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment for your pets. Always seek the advice of a qualified veterinarian with any questions you may have regarding your pet's health or medical condition. Never disregard professional veterinary advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. The hosts and the guests of this podcast are not liable for any actions taken based on the information shared during these episodes. Any reliance on the information provided is solely at your own risk. Copyright 2025 Practical Pet Chat, all rights reserved. Unauthorized duplication, distribution, or reproduction of any content from this podcast, including but not limited to audio, scripts, and show notes, is prohibited without prior written consent. The opinions and views expressed by the host and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Practical Pet Chat.